Welcome to Real Talk, where I give real answers to real questions from real worship leaders. If you have your own question you want on a future episode, head over to leadingworshipwell.com/realtalk and you can submit your question there. Let's get into the questions. Worship pastor at a new church and planning to change the onboarding process for team members. There wasn't one at all before. There hasn't been a worship pastor here for 18 months. What are your thoughts on how to handle existing team members? Grandfather them in? My reservation is there are several current worship team members who probably really aren't a right fit, and I'm having a hard time justifying asking new members to go through a certain process when the existing members didn't have to, or saying no to some new people when there are others already on the team who have an even lesser skill level and not a great heart posture, etc. So you come into a new church. What is the first thing that you do? And it always starts with this. All right, I started at this church that I'm at 2 years ago. And the first thing that I did was not start implementing changes left and right and telling worship team members that they were horrible and they shouldn't be on the worship team anymore. You start with building relationships and figuring out where people are currently at and why they are currently there. So first of all, I just want to say, if you haven't built relationships with these people yet, that needs to be your focus before you start shunning people from the worship team. All right. I understand that you want to put this process in place, and you 100% need to do that. But we need to do it tactfully and strategically over time. So build relationships with these people. And then after we've built relationships and kind of in tandem with that, we start casting vision for the team. And I think it's perfectly acceptable after you figure out how a team has done things to say, hey, listen, I know that you've done it this way for the past 8 years, but I would really love us to start doing it this way. That is your responsibility as the ministry leader. People should be expecting that when a new leader comes in, that things are going to change because people do things differently. And so you don't have to apologize for it. You just have to be firm and clear in your vision for the team. And so if these people aren't prepared for your worship rehearsal, then, you say, hey, I know we spent a lot of time in worship rehearsals lately, figuring out parts and stuff, but I would really love to move towards a place where we can just show up to worship rehearsal and we know our parts. And you don't have to call somebody specifically out right away. You just set the vision for your team. And you don't say, Joe, I've noticed that you aren't very good at guitar and you're never prepared. You just say, we want to step into this new way of doing things. That's what it means to lay the vision before your team and understand that it's not going to happen instantly. So that's sort of the high level view of the answer to that question. As far as grandfathering people into the worship team versus having them retry out, I would probably grandfather them in with the understanding that we are going to be doing things a little bit differently, and just tell them that up front. And so whatever system you're creating for new team members to join, hopefully that involves laying out the expectations for your team. And so you need to go through those expectations, not just with new team members, but people who are already on your team, and say, hey, I'm putting together this system for new team members who want to join the music, or who want to join the worship team. When they join that, I'm going to give them this document, and I want to make sure that you have it too, so you know that these are the things that I'm expecting of new team members, and not just new team members, but all the members on our worship team. So, and you can try to be a lot of these things you'll already know since you've been on the team for a while, but I just want to remind you of them. And so you hand that out. Maybe spend devotional time at your rehearsal going through those things. By the way, if you need a plan for your worship rehearsal, check out the worship rehearsal blueprint linked down in the description below. It's a free PDF where I'll show you a step-by-step guide so that you can make sure that you lead your team well, not just musically, but spiritually and relationally as well. So check that out in the description below. So at the end of the day, yes, grandfather them in, also teach them the new expectations. A couple of rehearsal questions for you. What day of the week do you rehearse? What time? And any format suggestions are always welcome too. I'm looking at making some changes and want to know what others are doing. Thanks a bunch. So, quick answer here. What day of the week do I rehearse? I rehearse on Thursdays with my team. I feel like that gives us enough time to have like a little buffer period between rehearsal and Sunday mornings. Obviously, and I've gotten pushback on this before. People are like, I don't do a midweek rehearsal. People just show up on Sunday and they know their parts. I hear that, and I understand people are like church plants and they can't practice throughout the week. I like to practice throughout the week, not just for the musical side of things, but also the relational side of things. Like if you're only gathering on Sunday mornings with your team for an hour before the service, when are you pouring into them spiritually and building relationships with them? So for me, I just think that midweek rehearsals just add that other time during the week where we can be a little bit more focused, not just on the music, because being on the worship team isn't just about music, but it also is about building relationships with each other and growing in our relationship with God. So we practice on Thursdays. What time? We practice at 6 o'clock. Right now, I'd be willing to push that back to 6:30, but just figure out, whenever you're figuring out these answers to these questions, when should I rehearse during the week and what time? I don't think it ultimately matters that much. Like, just pick whatever time works for the majority of people on your team. I think what's more important is having a plan for your worship team. And I know I just mentioned it 5 seconds ago. So if you don't have a plan for your worship rehearsals, check out the worship rehearsal blueprint in the description below. For those of you who have multiple singers on stage for praise and worship, do you have them sing harmonies when musically appropriate? If not, why not? Yes. If I have singers on stage, one of them will sing harmony. And this is something that I learned from Passion. I think I was watching something from their Lift conference. I think it was like a vocal workshop or something, but they said something that stuck with me that made a lot of sense, because obviously Passion Church, their big church, they have like a large stage, so they have multiple singers on their stage, but they were talking about how they only ever have one lead vocalist and then they have one harmony singer. And then the other people who are leading on stage vocally, they are just singing the melody, because the melody is what the people in the church are singing. So the harmony is, extra piece to the musical sound, but we don't want people to focus on the harmony. We want them singing the melody. So we need to reinforce the melody. And I just thought that that was a really interesting way to promote congregational singing, to reinforce the melody of the song and not have like this amazing 4-part harmony, which might sound really cool, but it might also confuse people and they aren't going to know which part to sing, and so they might not sing at all. And so we want our people singing in unison. That doesn't mean that we can never have harmony, and people out in your congregation will probably sing harmony a little bit anyway. Some people just naturally do that. But we want to support the melody of the song. So if let's say I had 4 singers, one of them would sing the lead melody, and they would lead the song. Another one of them would sing harmony, and then the other ones would sing the melody and reinforce that, and probably be a little bit back off the mic, and it would be more just their presence on stage leading whoever is in front of them on Sunday morning. Hey, I was seeing what all your worship leaders do to get people involved during worship. It's mainly middle ages and up group that I lead. I was just picture like knights in armors or something. Like I'm sure they mean middle school or something, but the Middle Ages. I do a mix of old songs and new songs. There are many services where I look out at the people like they wish they were somewhere else. Like this past Sunday night, I was standing there and ready to worship. Nobody stood, just sat there staring. No clapping or raising hands or singing like about every service. I do fast clapping. The words to every song are on the screen, and these songs I've done multiple times over the years. How can I get life in the service and get them to participate? So, how do you get people to engage in worship? Well, first of all, if this is true, and I've heard this before, and I think sometimes we put the focus too heavily on just a few specific people, and we see like a group of people, especially if this is Middle Ages. I assume that that's the youth maybe. If that's true, maybe there's a subset of the youth that just aren't paying attention. And to be honest, this is something that I've thought about, especially with youth in worship. And this isn't just true for youth. This is for anybody. You can't lead unbelievers in worship. And I know, like, kids go to church. That doesn't make them a believer automatically. Like, let's just be real. A lot of people go to church. That doesn't make them a believer automatically. And so first, we need to ask the question, are these people even believers? And then if they aren't, and we want them to worship, we need to take the steps to help them become a believer, or else they will never worship. So I think that that's the deeper underlying issue here. Now, if it is believers in your church who aren't engaging in corporate worship, then I like to start with the low-hanging fruit, where it's like, do these people know these songs? Because sometimes we're doing new songs every single week and people don't know them, so of course they aren't going to sing along or engage in them. So if you pick like 4 songs in your worship set that you know for certain that the people of your church know and they don't respond, then yes, maybe there's a deeper issue. But start there. Think about your song selection. Number 2, like, how are we leading these people? Are we leading with them in mind, or am I just picking a bunch of songs that I want to do? Number 3, is my worship team, like, do they sound like garbage? Like, I'm just being real here. Like, if your worship team is really, really bad, of course it's going to be distracting for people in your church. And that doesn't mean that they can't worship. I'm just saying it's going to make it harder for them to engage in worship. So think about yourself here. Think about your own leadership before we go blame everybody else. From there, if those low-hanging fruit, easy to fix things do not fix it, then maybe there needs to be some teaching on worship in your church, and people just don't understand what worship is. So talk about it with your pastor. Like, this shouldn't just be your concern, by the way. This should be a concern for your pastor. If your pastor agrees that people aren't engaging in corporate worship, that is like one of the main things that we do as a church, and so that should be immediately addressed by your pastor. So talk to your pastor about it if you are really concerned, and hopefully if they recognize that as a problem, they'll be like, yeah, you know what, I need to shift my teaching schedule to teach people about corporate worship. So I hope that helped. Like, there's some foundational stuff in there. Like, these people have to be believers to worship. They have to know what worship is and why we do it. And then if you feel like you have those things in place, then start working on those low-hanging fruit, where it's like, I need to pick songs that people can sing, so on and so forth. If you are a real worship leader with real questions and you want a real answer to it, then head over to leadingworshipwell.com/realtalk, where you can submit your own questions for future episodes. Other than that, thanks so much for joining me. Until I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.